Hello, and welcome to the first, chapter of the Gospel according to Gehrke, or at least that's what I'm planning on calling this so far. So, this is sort of an introductory episode, but I don't want to make the entire thing a prelude to what I'm getting at. I want to get some real content in here, but I'll start off by explaining a little bit. This is going to be a series without any real scheduling that I foresee, where I just talk about things that are spiritually relevant to me, I guess. Even not spiritually solely pertaining to religion, but a deep dive into religion for sure. The Gospel according to Gehrke is, of course, a reference to the Gospels, and I, being a Roman Catholic, is my background, but I am an agnostic currently, and I do want to talk specifically about several different religions. I think that's a big point of this, to kind of tie them together and see what strings we can bring into our lives regardless of what we believe. But the main goals of this, I guess, is to have a more sort of scripted conversation where I have, well, not scripted, but I have guidelines to follow, in that I want to talk to you guys about ways to bring ritual back into the world, which is one of the it's one of my goals. I'll say that's goal number one, and I think if you stay around long enough, I want to help you eliminate or reduce your fear of death, help you become more open-minded to points of view you may not have seen before, and ideally provide you with some sort of knowledge. I don't know the most about these things. This is also going to be a big journey for me that I would like to share with you guys. And as I see it, you talk in sci-fi and in fiction about this idea of uploading your brain, in the future, and you never really die. And I don't find this too far off. I think, imagine if we could listen to George Washington sit down and discuss his thoughts in a podcast format like this. I think this is really a wild future we're in, where I'm happy to project this out into the multiverse and have my thoughts recorded on these important topics for the future to listen to. And I do think just its very existence is a good timestamp of my time here on Earth, which is very limited. And I'm still scared of death. Obviously, I think if somebody pointed a gun at me and was like, "I'm going to kill you," I would feel nothing but fear. And I think a lot of us would. And I'm trying to... I do think, in the more broad sense of one day I'm going to die, I'm trying to reduce and eliminate that fear and make it more of a positive thing. So first, I guess I wanted to say this is ideally going to be a family-friendly sort of project. I'll try, not to swear and to be vulgar. I work on Triptide as well, which is a podcast that's more of social conversation with a few of my friends and acquaintances. And that is more, geared towards college-age kids who speak like we do. But this I want to be accessible to listen to for everyone. Now, I want to clarify that I'm not going to leave out topics that I find relevant. And there's a lot of, especially coming from a Christian background, in religion and in the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita, there's a lot of battle and bloodshed and sexual activity that occurs. And I do want to address the morality of it. And I think it's important that kids be able to listen to these things, but obviously I'm nobody's parent, so I would just like to clarify. This will be more of a relaxed, very, PG podcast, but I will be going into certain topics throughout the run of it that may not be, certain parents may not want their kids to listen to, and that's for whoever to decide. But I guess I'll start off with this idea that ritualism ritual practice is sort of vanishing, and I don't understand how there's not a bigger pushback, because in my mind it seems like there's very profound thoughts in all of these religions and all of these spiritual texts about the human existence, and people, it doesn't seem to be part of our daily social lives. People don't go around talking about, or at least mine personally, people don't go around talking about their Bible verses or their, scriptures and their prayers and their different ways to become at peace and their meditation. And something I want to talk about a lot is meditation. But I view a large part of this as, and I'm going to try to be very frank and honest in my views as well. You don't have to agree with me, but I think a large part of it is flaw on the parts of these religions, which are a wide array of our ritual practice as people. Religion's been part of our lives for, probably around the age of intelligent discussion. There was somebody questioning why we're here, and somebody saying, well, someone made it. There's a God, which is a prime concept of religion. And I think, coming from primitive people, a lot of these religions have been distorted and shaped to fit society and still have some inherent flaws that I'll get into for sure. And part of it, I am agnostic. I don't view one religion as being able to identify with my beliefs and my values, but I still want to draw from them in a way that can positively influence my life. And I think there's a big aspect of really changing your view on what these philosophies really are that's required in order to draw from all of these different sources, because some of them are very conflicting and some of them are very exclusive and very hard to get into. And I do want to take a deep dive into, probably early on I'll talk a lot about Christianity, because that is my background, that is my expertise per se, and I've just started reading the Bible actually straight through, and it's going to take me a while, so I won't be educated on it, but I am very curious to see what I find when I actually look through the pages of the Bible, because I know a lot of the stories, but I don't know a large amount of them. I don't think most people do. But to get more into these general concepts, I do want to bring ritual practice back, even in the sense of meditation. Things that make people feel at peace with themselves. Even if you don't get into religion at any point in your life, I don't think that's the only way to have ritual practice or spiritual practice. I think existence as a human, there's something spiritual about that, and ritual is, even if you wake up in the morning and you say, all right, I'm going to be productive, or, I'm going to greet myself and clear my mind. Things like that I think are very beneficial and have nothing to do with what you believe in religion. I think those base concepts are often prominent in religion, but aren't, you don't have to be a certain denomination or any denomination to practice them. I think there's a lot of spirituality and ritualism that can be followed from an atheist point of view. And I kind of want to take the ideas that the most devout religious people practice and boil them down into something that even an atheist can participate in. And I don't think it matters essentially to your morality as a person if you believe that a God created us or one didn't, or that there's an afterlife or there isn't. Regardless of what you believe, I think what's important is that you are not using it as a facet of as a reason to be closed-minded, which is, I think, is a big issue right now in human religion. And of course, I clarify human religion. It's the only religion I know of, but maybe there's some very influential alien religions that have surpassed this, and certain human religion certainly has too, but I'm thinking widespread things like the Abrahamic religions, and I'm sure much of, you know, I it's hard because I don't know about Hinduism really, but I imagine it has similar flaws structurally to the religion that I'm in touch with. And again, I want to call out these flaws very realistically and accurately, but that doesn't mean I want to call out the religion as a whole necessarily, because I think there's things to be gained from it, and a large part of doing that is accepting the good with the bad, which is something that I'm trying to, I'm trying to experiment with. How do you take the positive views of something and just drop the negative views, because you really don't need them to experience the whole message. But on top of that, obviously one of the things I said is I want to reduce or eliminate this fear of death. So earlier I talked about the instantaneous death, not the instantaneous, but the momentary death, I'm going to die. And I think, especially being young, it would be hard to really eliminate that from one's life. But I want to take this idea that I'm going to die eventually and make peace with it. And I think I've made large personal strides of progress, which I'm hoping to facilitate in other people, because I think death being one of the very few things that ties every single person, everything that is alive, everything dies. That it ties it all together. It's really the missing puzzle piece. So I think if we can get more positivity around it and more comfortable with it, obviously you shouldn't go killing anybody, but you should be ready to die and live with the understanding that at some point you're going to die, in my mind. Again, everything I'm saying, I don't want you to try to say, he's projecting these philosophies as fact. I do think I'm a junior philosopher, if anything, to call it that. I'm trying to experiment and grow in these ideas, and I'm very open to feedback, of course, to anyone listening. I'll probably put this on YouTube and Spotify, but I'll also link to the Instagram if anyone wants to chat about these things, and I'd love to hear your guys' ideas. I want you to listen to these because you're open-minded and because you're looking to expand your views and shape your views more and grow, and that's what I'm trying to do. So I kind of wanted to put that process out as I engage in it. And also, there will be some very direct moments where I state things that I believe as facts, and I'm always open to be debated on them. I'm always open to be contradicted on them and have a conversation about that, which I think is the prime aspect of this, because if you're not willing to have a conversation, you don't have strength in your beliefs. But before I loop too far around, I'll do a lot of kind of jumping from point A to point B. I think that might be my ADHD at work, but I'll try to follow through points I bring up, starting with this one of death. I think I want to really hit home that there's something to the idea that when I die, I am gone, And that's scary. It's a very scary aspect, and I don't think I'll be ready to die young ever, but I'm hoping by the time I'm old, I'll be able to make a greater peace with this end of life. And so, like I said, I don't want this to all be preliminary, so I want to get some ideas on this out. I want to talk about, there's a French concept, and it is a little, it involves sexual activity, just to preface this, but it's about the orgasm, which is called the little death, because there's, this buildup of joy, excitement, energy, and activity, followed by this release, and this beautiful release of feeling. And it's over. And the idea is, take that excitement and that energy and multiply it out to become somebody's life. and then death is the great orgasm of letting go of these feelings. And I know that's a weird way to put it, for sure, but something about that did speak to me in that, death isn't a bad thing. Death is this release from all we're going through and all we're dealing with. And I think a lot of the times for death to be good, it implies the concept that life is bad, and I don't agree with that. I think life is a beautiful thing that we're supposed to cherish, and I am very, blessed to be alive, and especially in my living situations, but obviously there's still struggle. I think everyone has struggle, and everyone has pain, and everyone has strife, and the older you get, I think the more your body falls apart and it's ready to be done. So I think the idea isn't that you just have a terrible existence and then you're finally free of it. I think the idea is that you have this existence and it is what you make of it. But at the end, you finally get to just relax and stop trying, which is why you should live large while you're on life. And even if the way you live large is being very pacifist, very introverted, whatever makes you feel at peace, maybe that's best for you. I don't know what we're supposed to do on Earth, but I do know that we're supposed to die. And there's something very prominent to that. There's, of course, the idea of the afterlife, which I'll get into different theories and my thoughts on them in the future. But I don't think, personally, I don't think there's this experience where you die and then your personality lives on. I find that to be against the point of life in a sense, that you would die and nothing would really change. You would lose your body, but you'd keep your soul in essence, which is what your personality is often mixed up with. And I don't agree they're the same concept, personally. Because I think your personality lives after you die. It lives on Earth. And it lives in your actions and in memories. And however it's alive, if you write something down, that's your personality speaking. That's your mind interacting with the world. Everything you do on Earth stays until it doesn't, And if you die without leaving a mark on Earth, maybe you'll have a very small personality impact. And that's okay. But that is how I see your personality living on. Now, the soul, I think, if anything, to live on is in the sense that your energy goes back into the world, There's this conservation of matter. I think there's something similar for life. Not that you directly reincarnate as somebody, but whatever it is that allows you to be this intelligent being, there's an energy in the universe, Whatever created the stardust that created the elements that created us. There's this perpetual motion of energy that, maybe it's not a perpetual motion, to correct myself, but there's this continuous motion of energy, the circle of life, for all of you who've seen Lion King. And your energy goes somewhere in the universe. So if you'd like to believe that you're alive still, to me that would indicate more of the universe is alive and all of that energy is kind of moving and flowing and the universe is growing. And we've seen that the universe is growing. So maybe, that part of the universe became you and now you died and have gone back into the universe. So your personality and your soul can live on, but I don't personally believe in a concept where we die and then, you reunite with everyone from your past. As sad as it seems, I think you can reunite in that your energy is part of the universe and you are living in the same collective existence as them. And this is definitely a large topic to get back to, and I will in a moment, but I did want to keep on this concept of death quick with something a friend of mine told me in high school, and it was kind of while I was exploring atheism, and it was this idea of afterlife not existing, and it was people can't fathom not being alive. Once you're this intelligent being, you can't fathom dying and there just being emptiness. Well, the concept is, think about what it was like before you were born. It wasn't scary. It wasn't painful. There was nothing bad. There was nothing good. You simply had an experience to these things. And people take those life experiences and make them into a justification for getting more. And I think, it's very possible. I wouldn't say very possible personally in my beliefs, but I think it is possible that you die and there is something else, Your mind stays intact and there's just a straight, very basic afterlife concept. I'm not going to say it's impossible because I don't have any evidence to support that. But I think regardless of if it is, it's healthier to live on the expectation there's not. One, because we don't have any, logically to me, we don't have any reason to assume that when you die, you are still alive. I think that's a very optimistic view on death, where people are striving to hang on. But I think practically what it does is a lot of people take this idea, be it, heaven or whatever, I guess Valhalla or other afterlives where your spirit maintains all of your memories and your personality, those kinds of aspects of an afterlife. I personally think they do take away from the life experience a little bit because it has you living in a reality where what you do on Earth is often only relevant in how it affects your afterlife. It doesn't have an intrinsic value, and maybe people disagree with me, but I believe that if you don't die when you die, it takes away from the value of what you did while you were alive. You are all of a sudden living with a backup plan for everything you do. It's not, this is the only life I get. It's, you only get to be alive once, so enjoy it and make peace and don't do anything dangerous and don't have conflict, because that's how you get to this safety net you have, the afterlife. And I don't believe the safety net should be the afterlife should be a safety net. I think if anything, it should be a realization that your personality is limited and your memories are tied to your physical brain, and you will lose these things, so you should cherish them. Now, I would like to hear people who disagree with me vastly, because when I was younger, I grew up Roman Catholic, and I was taught heaven, very, very plain and simple. And I had issues with it conceptually, because the idea was, well, when I die, what if there is nothing? And I didn't want to spend my time doing something, going to church. And if you go to church, of course, I'm not going to say it's bad, but I didn't enjoy church. I didn't take anything from it. For me, it was a chore. It was not a proper ritual. I just didn't get anything from it, and probably because of my age. And you can argue taking children to church, but the idea for me was I was intelligent enough to realize that I was getting nothing out of this. I didn't listen to the stories. I just tried to distract myself until it was over, because I was bored. I was fidgety, and as an ADHD child, I just really couldn't handle processing what I was being told when I wasn't interested in it, and it felt like I had to. So the idea was, if this is what I'm doing for the sake of getting to the afterlife, if there's no afterlife, this is time I've wasted, because I wasn't drawing any benefit from it. And you could say I was learning patience or things of that manner, which, you could definitely argue, but as I see it, there are better ways to do it and ways I could voluntarily do that. I think if it's involuntary, there's a lot of over the head going of what's being said and what's being mentioned and taught. So I do think if other people are in that situation, I'd like them to consider what they do with their lives. And I'm watching Star Wars The Clone Wars on Disney Plus right now and loving it. And I don't think I could really look at a grand scheme of my life and say watching every season of Star Wars The Clone Wars is the greatest use of my life. I'm not going to pretend I always live with this intrinsic purpose that I probably should. But something like going to church, I didn't even enjoy doing it. I didn't want to do it. I was kind of made to do it. And if you're in a situation where for you church just feels like a chore, I want you to consider that if there's not an afterlife, you have spent a lot of your time doing something that you didn't draw from. So the two solutions I would pitch are either stop going to church or learn how to get something from your time at church. Now, the older I got, the more I was interested in Christianity, surprisingly. I'll talk about, I guess, my journey with the religion in a moment, but recently I've enjoyed going to church because, one, I didn't go alone. I went with friends who I could talk about the concepts with after, and I didn't go alone when I was younger. I went with friends, but it was very much like I had to because I went with my school, and I went with my family who it wasn't, they weren't really ready to have on a Sunday morning a deep philosophical discussion about the religion. That's not what they were there for. That's not what they were getting out of it. But I had to go anyway. So now that I'm able to really critically look at the religion from an outside perspective, I get a lot out of it. So, of course, you don't have to go to church, but I want to talk a little bit about how to draw from your time at church. Now, if you're a Christian at least, I think Jewish, practicing members call it temple, but I might be wrong. That might be racist, and if so, I'm sorry. But I'll have to look into that in the future because I do want to talk about Judaism more later because it's so close to Christianity, but it's so different in practice. So for me, a big part of my anti-Christianity phase was that it felt that I'd been forced into the religion essentially. I went to a school where education of the world was mixed in with education of the religion. And that can get confusing as a kid because if you don't agree with something in the religion, it's coming from the same people who are teaching you history and math and science and things that you're supposed to agree with. And there are concepts like hell that I find immoral. If there is a God, I would want him to be a good God. That's maybe oversimplifying things, but I'd want him to be a morally good person. Now, I'm going to be pretty direct about this. The God in Genesis is not a good person by human standards. And people always say, well, his power and his intellect is beyond human understanding, and we don't understand his reasoning. But to put it rather simply, God doesn't like the earth he made, and he thinks the people on it aren't good enough. So he floods it, and he kills everybody. And that's a very immature response to this. And sure, he does give Noah an ark and say, take all of the life on this ark so it can repopulate. But if we're okay with a God that will just kill us if we don't live up to his view, that's an immoral thing to do, And then there's this concept of hell that exists, in Christianity at least, where maybe it's an eternal suffering, which is kind of hell and brimstone and fire hell is how I had pictured it. How could somebody live in a heaven, which is this afterlife where you maintain your personality and your memory, and it's a good place? How could they do it knowing that there is somebody who's in an eternal bad place? How is there no guilt in heaven for the people who are suffering eternally? And things like that really got to me. So the way I've been able to get to church, and it's not like I go every Sunday. I think a big part of it for me is realizing I don't have to go. I'm choosing to go. And I don't always go. If I go with someone. But a big part of it for me is I'm not a Christian when I go. I'm saying, well, I'm Dawson, and I'm going to look at what I'm being told and see if there's value in it, see if there's not. And either way, I'm going to consider that this is the message of Christianity that affects my country at such a scale, I think historically Christianity is a huge player, and as a history major, I find it fascinating to look into history. So it's interesting to go to church and see what they're teaching as a ritual practice, but on the understanding that I don't have to go every Sunday, and I don't have to agree with what they're saying. I can pick and choose what I'm listening to, and that I can be upset at some of the things they're telling, and I can disagree with it. And if I want to leave, I can, quite simply. And I rarely do I go to church and I leave and I'm in a fit and I'm like, oh, I can't believe they're saying Jesus. Like, I don't get uppity about these things, but I just think the way to appreciate Christianity for me has been not being a Christian. And this is because, I also get to appreciate things like the Bhagavad Gita, and I get to appreciate Muslim culture, which I have really yet to dive into, and I get to appreciate Buddhism, which I have dove into a bit, and I find very attractive as a religious mindset. And the Tao Te Ching, which is, I think, on par with religion in that it was an influential philosophy, but it doesn't have the narrative structure of religion. So that's kind of my advice for people out there who are in the position I was in, where you still have to go to church right now. You're not allowed to opt out. I know it's hard because for me, a big part of why I'm able to go to church if I want to is knowing I don't have to. A big part of it is that if I didn't go, I'm not a worse person. There's millions and millions and millions of people who don't go to church every Sunday, and they're not just bad people all of a sudden. And, this is something when I was younger I was kind of uncertain about because we were taught you're supposed to go to church every Sunday. So I think for you, if you're struggling with this, it should be look at this from a non-Christian perspective and really analyze it and see how it can apply to your life as a philosophy. Religion as philosophy has greatly increased my appreciation for religion. And again, I wanted to dig into some of the things that are hard to justify. And I said the God in Genesis is not a moral God. Well, you look at, Abraham has slaves, and it's just part of the culture. And God, he blows up a town of sinners after Noah's Ark. He blows up a town pretty much because they're immoral. And Abraham, these angels come. It's not Abraham. I think it's Abraham's either nephew or uncle or somebody named Lot. Lot is in this town, and he tells his son-in-laws that they have to get out because God's going to blow it up. And they think he's joking, and they stay, and they die. So not only has God killed wicked, God's killed people who misinterpreted his message. And by God, I'm referring to Yahweh. I'll try to refer to the Bible God as Yahweh because that's the name he uses when he speaks to Moses. And I don't want to demonize Yahweh, but I want to actualize him for what he is. I don't understand this view people have where Christianity teaches these positive things, so it's okay that canonically the same God in the New Testament and the Old Testament, who, the church teaches is the same one God, he does some pretty messed up things. I think the biggest example is the book of Job. And there's a story where the devil, or maybe it's Satan, but it's a character of evil, basically. this character comes up and they're like, oh, look at Job, how, they're doing work or something. And God's like, yep, Job is my most devout subject or something. He's like, Job definitely loves me. I am the best. So this figure, I guess I'll call him the devil, but I could be wrong. It's either the devil or Lucifer or Satan. It's one of them, and I think there's technically a difference in the three of those terms. But he's like, okay, well, he doesn't really love you. He loves you because your life is good. So God allows the devil to basically give this man a plague, kill his family, kill his livestock, make him look hideous. His friends all tell him, God did this because you upset him and because he hates you and he's mad at you because you've been bad to him, because that was the belief back then. And God just lets this happen. He lets this divine entity do this to test Job. And when Job gets mad and breaks down and loses his faith in God, God yells at him. He gets mad at him. So the story here is that we're supposed to be good to God even if he's not good to us. And it's wrong to question his authority. And I don't think, the new Christian God is often painted as this figure of love. And it's simply incompatible with the Old Testament at certain points. And I think you have to really look critically at what is the lore you're getting at, and certain parts of the Bible no longer hold up in spiritual belief because, again, I want to really hit home that Yahweh is not always a good moral God. And that's a very groundbreaking concept, Maybe it seems like it's, that's straightforward and who cares, but the idea is this is, for many people, the entity that created the universe, and we're living in his honor and praying to him and serving him so that way we can reach the afterlife he has set up for us. And I think it blows my mind because there's a lot of benefits to Christianity, sure, but ultimately being tied to this God is a dangerous road of neglecting how to think. And I want to get into this concept, especially as I go, of what to think versus how to think. And Neil deGrasse Tyson talked about it in his book, Letters from an Astrophysicist, which I recommend. But there's this idea of, what to think. I taught them religion as fact. And there's a point where everyone realizes it's not, because mathematically, the universe, we had the Scopes monkey trial, the universe is too old, or even the earth is too old for the biblical account of it. And I think the Bible refers to, the earth as kind of being flat with a dome over it rather than a spherical object. And there's certain things that during the time the Bible and the Old Testament was put together, the scientific and mathematical principles we had knowledge of didn't allow the Bible to be entirely accurate. And on top of that, if you look at it as a moral guideline, the Bible's not always morally accurate if Yahweh, who is this, ultimate figure, has his moral flaws. Again, Lot is leaving this town that's blown up with his wife and his two daughters. And his wife looks back at the, explosion and the brimstone raining down on this town God's blowing up. And she turns into a pillar of salt. She just evaporates like that. She didn't do anything wrong, but I guess because she didn't, look away from his wrath, God's ultimate fury, she died. Things like this just happen in the Old Testament. And I'll bring up more as I get through it. There's been a lot of uncomfortable points in the Old Testament, such as, God taking very rash and very aggressive action against people that doesn't seem at all justified. So I want to break it down because what do we do with the Bible then? Should we just throw it away because it's flawed? No, I don't think so. I think a lot of things are flawed, And of course, you see me ask myself an easy question there just to answer it. But I think a lot of things are flawed and they still have value. Point in case, everyone you ever met. I don't think anyone's going to be morally perfect. And God isn't supposed to reflect humanity in the Bible. He's supposed to reflect something greater, which I think the issue is if you make your God perfect and he's not perfect, it creates this duality of what is it then? Is it just fake? But I think if you read the Bible, and of course I still have to read the Bible, and there's things I don't agree with. Obviously, I've made that clear in this little discussion. But I think if you even, go to church or listen to the points of the Bible as points of view from an outside perspective, in the same way you might read, the Bhagavad Gita, which is this Western text. I guess Eastern text. I always mix that up. I know Gandhi read it. Mahatma Gandhi, when he was in India, protesting for a countless times he really protested, but he loved the Bhagavad Gita, and it's this. I have to read it myself still once I finish the Bible, so it'll be a while before I actually dive into it. But to my knowledge, it's the story of a war involving Krishna and Arjuna and other different gods. And I think reading it is basically seeing a lot of life-related spiritual and ritual philosophy that is very relevant to our lives. I can't speak totally on behalf of the Bible, but obviously it's been around so long and it's influenced the world enough that the Bible is kind of the same thing, Even if you don't view it as Arjuna and Krishna are real gods, you can read the Bhagavad Gita and take from it. And I don't think you have to believe there is no God, or even that, Yahweh isn't in some sense God. I don't think those things are required of you, that you believe or disbelieve them. But I think you have to read the Bible with the understanding that it's not perfect. It's a philosophy, and you don't have to take it all at face value. So why I bring this up is I think with every religion, you should prioritize your individuality over a collective spirituality. I think you should do the rituals and the spiritual practices that work for you rather than the ones that you're told are best. Again, if you are told that a big political debate right now is abortion, and I'm not going to, pick a side because that's not what this podcast is about or what this chapter, I guess, is about. But if you are told that it is okay or that it's not okay, that dictates a lot of people's views politically. And religion tells a lot of people that abortion is wrong. Regardless of if it is, it will never be right or wrong because someone said so. It's only right or wrong because there's an argument to be made, and it's a good argument. So if, in things like killing, murder isn't wrong because it's one of the commandments not to kill. Murder is wrong because you're taking another human life by force away. And that is, we as a human collective can agree that's morally wrong. So I think when you're reading the Bible, it's good to see things like, the commandment that thou shalt not kill. It's like, well, I agree with that. I think that's really important to me. I don't want to kill anybody. But I think you must read these things with the understanding of it's not true because the Bible said so, but the Bible can highlight ways it's true, and the Bible can help cement that value, and the Bible can make an argument for that value. And one, I think, that's fascinating is, worship the Sabbath or something. And it's probably not worded that way, but Sunday is important. That's one of the commandments, essentially. And I guess for the Jews, it's Saturday, I think. I could be wrong. I could have made that up. But it's this idea that we take a day of rest and don't do anything. Now, for every college student I've ever met, if you have an exam on Monday, you're certainly not taking Sunday off. you're probably cram studying that Sunday. And if you have work on Sunday, you're going to work for the money. You don't want to just say, well, I need this money, but the Bible said to take Sunday off, so I can't work. That becomes inconvenient in life. And maybe it's a good ritual to take Sunday off, and if you're able to do it, that's good. But again, we don't do it anymore because we looked at the Bible as a society, and a largely Christian society, and I think things like that didn't stick in the Christian world. They kind of fell apart, and you'll see Chick-fil-A is not open on Sundays because they're a religious business. It's totally fine for them to practice that, even though if you want the true dirt on Chick-fil-A, they are, in the past, they have been anti-gay, which is frankly wrong. You should never be anti-gay. That, Chick-fil-A, I don't want to stand up for Chick-fil-A at any point in this show until I learn new evidence. I love their chicken, but not their morals. But anyway, yeah, it's not bad to take every Sunday off, but you don't have to take every Sunday off just because the Bible said so. If it's a good way for you to make peace with your world and kind of view reality as a place you're really connected to the universe and you feel like you're being a good person, I think pretty much the goals of spirituality and ritual are to feel connected to the universe and to be a good person, in my mind, and to feel connected to yourself especially. And not, your ego, the part of you that's saying, give me money and give me pleasure and give me this and that. The part of you that is willing to learn and is willing to love and is willing to be open to experiences. And I personally find meditation is a great way to get into that state. And I'm sure at some point the Bible must talk about meditation. Obviously, this series is not going to be exclusively about Christianity, but in these first episodes, I think I'm going to use it as kind of a connecting point between my ideas because I know much more about Christianity than any other religion. And I think I want to get some base concepts out of the way, like I disagree with several points of the Bible, but the Bible can still be useful. And you should never believe something because a religious source or, even a respected person or a parent says it. That's a good argument for that. But you should always be open to the idea that there's something out there. And I think if you really believe, and I'm not going to tell you to disobey your parents, but again, think about how many people are Republican and how many are Democrat. Both of them think they're right. Most of them are the same party as their parents in my mind because they were raised to be a certain way. And I think people near the middle are more distant. I have a parent of each political backing, which I think maybe that's why I'm independent, which I am so happy with because I think the farther you get into any mindset, the more you lose the actual discussion and the actual reasoning for what you're saying. If your reason for being a Democrat is Republicans are bad, then you don't know what your party's for. You don't know why you're supporting it, and you're not trying to make it better. You're just scared of your opposition. Same thing if your reason for being a Republican is Democrat bad. I think each side has a responsibility to try to boost up their party, and neither's doing that. But back to the point of meditation. My challenge for you guys, since we're almost at an hour, we still have 12 minutes, but yeah, my challenge is to take time to sit, and you can either put on music or you can do it in silence. Either works fine for me. And just listen to your thoughts, as weird as it sounds. Maybe just even listen to music. Don't speak and don't make noise. And however long you're comfortable with, I'd recommend half an hour. Just take a half hour out of your day this week, and any day this week, and just sit there. You can either listen to nothing or listen to music, or you listen to chimes. It doesn't have to be music, but you can't make noise for half an hour, and you just think about your thoughts. Now, when I took communications classes early on in college, they taught me this idea of metacognition, which is thinking about what you're thinking and how you're thinking. And I think that is basically a more sciencey way of saying meditation, for me especially. A lot of people are going to meditate differently, and that's fine. Some people meditate by, going to church. Some people meditate by going to work if they're really that into it. But for me, I think it's important that you take time and really just sit there and listen to your thoughts for 1/2 hour this week. That's what I'm asking of you. And I think it'll really help you in terms of a lot of people don't do this frequently. And it doesn't mean just watch a show for half an hour. You have to be secluded from this external source. I think sound is a little easier to justify because you can still think over music without following it. If you're going to pick music, don't pick something with a lot of words. Pick something, maybe either classical music or like meditation music, Don't pick something that is the focus of your attention. The focus of your attention should be pretty much a blank slate, and you'll just see what comes to you and you'll think about it. And something like this, regardless of your religious affiliations, I think is a great way to start getting into your inner self and into your internal connection to the world and really figuring out, like, all right, take a breather. What's on my mind? If you want to think about something, go for it. If you want to keep an empty mind, go for it. I'm no guru on this. I'm sure I'll get better at meditation as I go. And I'll do it this week as well. I'll participate with you guys. I want to meditate more, but I'll set this challenge for myself at least a half hour this week. But it really helps you get in touch with yourself if you're able to just sit there and think about your own mind and how it's been working and what pops up and what you're thinking about, and then just stray back into blankness. And things like meditation, I value a lot because I don't think there's a religion that's against meditation. And if there is, it's quite frankly stupid. I think meditation is the type of thing I want to look at every religion and say, what do they have that I can draw from? Like meditation, just getting in touch with oneself, being a good person, these core values that are very simple. And I think a lot of religions display them in different ways. And there are prime connection to ritual and spirituality. This idea of your beliefs about a certain God tie into your spirituality. And I kind of want to stray away from that. I want to say, if you can meditate regardless of what your belief is, and Gandhi liked, I want to say it was the Bhagavad Gita, but Gandhi, he liked drawing the philosophies that connected everybody, that unified people, rather than the ones with confusing scripture that made it hard to understand the moral benefits and values being explained. Things that you had to jump through hoops to really get behind, or that separated you from people or excluded you from other people. And there's plenty to explain. I guess next week I'll probably try to go more into my personal Christian experience and the ups and downs of it, and more about the Bible specifically, because again, that is my prime jumping point for this. But I'll try, and maybe not next week. I just said that as next chapter, I guess, next episode. But after that, I'll try to get more into maybe some Buddhist knowledge. I have a Buddhist friend who maybe I can have give me things to talk about. And I really do want to explore, and I hope you guys do too. Because the prime thing I want you to take away from this is, if you are Christian, Muslim, Jewish, Hindu, Buddhist, whatever it may be, you don't use that as a way to exclude yourself. You don't say, well, I'm a Christian, he's not, I'm better than him. Or I'm a Muslim and he's not, we can't really be that good of friends, Anything of that line is just incorrect. Anything of, and I'm strongly opposed to the idea of, well, I'm baptized, so I'm going to heaven. He's not. He's not going to heaven. The idea that your religious beliefs affect your death and affect your outcome in life and affect your value in any way, I think that's ludicrous. It's your spiritual and ritual connections, maybe, and I don't want to sound like some hippie, but the idea being you don't have to identify to a religion to be in touch with yourself and in touch with the world and be a loving person and be a good person. It's not required that you join a membership to be a good person or to have a good death. We're all going to have a good death because whatever fear is in you, even if you're scared at the moment of death, when you die, you'll let go of that fear. And if you're really happy and you're having a great time and you don't want to go yet, I understand that, but you're going to, even if, there's no memory saving afterlife or personality imprint that'll stick with your soul, you are going to a better place still where you can release all of your time on earth and all of your stress and all of your anxiety and all of your emotion entirely and relax and dissolve away. And then your energy will go to something else in a beautiful cycle. And I don't want to die young either. And I think it is a very sad thing when people die young. I think the goal of dying is to die old, at least old enough that you're more ready, because I think there's a lot I still have to do. So I am going to look into being more content with, I guess, suddenly dying rather than dying at an old age, which I think is a hard thing to grasp for me because I am so attached to life. But yeah, I talked about a lot this episode. I really want to know what you guys' thoughts are, so please feel free to reach out. I know it was a bit all over the place, and there's some things that maybe I didn't explain well, so please reach out if you have anything to say or anything to ask. I'll be back eventually with another one of these, and of course I'm always doing Triptide, which is totally different episode, totally different show, but yeah. I was really enjoyed making this, and I look forward to making more in the future. So I guess I'll have to think of a sign out. If any of you guys have a good idea for a sign out, like, happy meditating, obviously that was just a made up one, but something I can say at the end of my episodes or the beginning of these, feel free to let me know. My Gehrke gospel out there, the Gehrke clan, whatever you guys will be called, the listeners. But yeah, I have a lot of work to do on this, obviously. So let me know what you think. And hopefully next time we'll get to talk more about my personal experience with Roman Catholicism and the ups and downs of that. Bye-bye.